Welcome back to the last talk before the lunch break. Peter and Uwe will right now show us how their pretty interesting Puppet workflow is, well, is what it's looking like, how it works, how they are testing or not testing, and enjoy it.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to our talk about what we call Agile operations with Puppet. We want to show you a little bit of the soft skill side of working with Puppet and show a workflow we developed over the last 2 years. And it naturally developed with a bigger team moving towards Puppet. And the principles we are showing are actually they are all available from like the community, and we combined it to a flow. So you can try it out at your workspace and see how it fits to you. And actually, we don't want to say that this is the way you should work with Puppet or you should do things. It's just we want to show our way, and at least it solve problems for us. But before we start, I want to give you a little bit of background, who we are and what we do. My name is Peter Simon, and I'm part of the mobile.de operations team, and I'm doing this talk together with Uwe Stuehler. Uwe is a freelancer and Puppet consultant and helped us a lot by developing this workflow. He actually not work in the site operations department itself for us. He works for a different part of the company, which is more related to the...
I'm just exploited by site operations.
Which is more related to the software development. So our team is about 10 people, and we do run 2 of successful German internet sites. So the first one is mobile.de. They're both eBay companies, and you probably know it if you are using a car in Germany or want to buy or sell a car in Germany. And the second one is eBay Kleinanzeigen, which is a marketplace for everything else, but also cars. And we operate that as well. And yeah, you have also nice pictures of kittens. So our work style is very agile, and we try to achieve a very product-focused work style. So we don't want to invest too much upfront where we don't know where the outcome is. We want to grow with each product phase. So we use Kanban to manage our work and to reduce our work in progress. We have about 900 systems in production and about the same amount of systems for development, which we maintain. We're running it out of multiple data centers, and we use mainly Debian and Solaris and some other operating systems. We just don't want to stick to a certain operating system and try to be bound to it. We do continuous delivery with about 5 to 7 live deployments per day on the platform. And we work closely together with our software development. So every team member from the site operations team is at least a member of a software development team as well, and try to give inputs from the operations side in a very early phase of the product development. So to do that, we managed we developed our infrastructure management flow, which you see, it's, I think, the typical 3 pillars. What you need nowadays to run a web platform or any other IT application, you need some kind of provisioning where you get the operating system on the bare metal server or on the virtual machine. We have an internal framework, therefore, which is comparable to Puppet's Razor. And it does all the inventory of the machine, all the network config, DNS, DHCP config, and then it starts the installation with the operating system's auto installer or network install, and it starts the first Puppet run. And then afterwards, the whole configuration and the whole state of the machine is maintained by Puppet. This internal framework also is used as ENC, as external node classifier for Puppet. So Puppet gets the metadata, the information from the data center out of that. and then it does the configuration. For the deployment of our product software, we also developed an internal tool which we might open source later, and this enables us to have this enables us to have a deployment pipeline from development to production, and so that we can do continuous delivery. And yeah, it's based on Apache Zookeeper, and yeah, our product is only loosely coupled with the system configuration. So we don't have the dependency to have a product rollout and a configuration rollout at the same time or coupled as maybe some other do. This is, from my point of view, a nice situation because both changes or both changes can be done independently. So this talk obviously concentrates about the middle part of this pillar, and yeah, but before we started with Puppet, we had FAI for Debian for installation and configuration, and yeah, as you probably know, FAI is not so good at maintaining the state of the configuration. You would have to run at least a fancy shell loop to get all host updates, and it actually doesn't suit to our new needs. And in fact, if you really want to have the installation consistent, you would the configuration consistent, you would have to do a reinstallation of the systems. And so that was limiting our velocity, and we needed to change that. So it was good that we had to introduce a new architecture, which we want to maintain. We are running Apache on Spark Solaris, or Solaris Spark architecture, and we hadn't have any configuration management solution for that. So we tried out Puppet, and it worked pretty good. And so we decided to do a sustained migration of all server classes toward there. So we also had to onboard everyone from the team with the new technology. We got training from Puppet Labs, which was really good. I can really recommend it. And yeah, so this was like 2 years ago, and so now we want to show you how the things evolved and how we are using Puppet now, or how we work with it. I want to shortly give you an overview how the whole process looks like, and then hand over to Uwe, who will explain the details. So currently, if a system administrator does a change, he or she can do it on its own and implementing it, and is able to do that without checking in anything, and he gets the feedback for syntax and functionality, so he's able to test the change. If he thinks it's okay, the change is fine, he will put the change into a review system. We use Garrett for that. This is a tool we will explain later. And out of that, this system will trigger a continuous integration tests, similar to that what we saw at the presentation from Pascal from Nokia. And out of that, it will also ask your peers for review. They can comment on the change and rate it and also give feedback. Once this is done, Garrett will merge the change, and this will this triggers an update on the Puppet masters, and the Puppet gets a new configuration, and the change will be rolled out to production. And we get feedback from Nagios about how it went well, if it went well or not, this configuration, and how the performance was. So I think this is where you can take over.
Oh, hello. Test. Okay, so yeah, that's basic. The basic elements of the workflow is what we're going to show. The tools themselves that we used are kind of exchangeable, and it's the most important part to us is that we have all of these steps and we are aware of this workflow all the time, so we can keep on improving that. And it's not necessarily means that it's complete or anything. So without further ado, as Peter said, the first step where we get feedback, the first step is actually to develop, and we can do that without even checking in. So that's done by having our own personal environments per system administrator. It's automatically set up, and the NFS home directory is mounted on all Puppet masters. So we have one environment where we can work in, and that's available across data centers, across all the existing servers, and we can just pick any random server and start doing, for example, also no-op runs against our environment to see if our change don't affect a certain important role. Then once, in contrast to that, of course, as Peter also mentioned, we have the production environments, the standard environments that Puppet uses. They're mapped to specific branches in Git in our scenario. And they're always updated via cron. They're always ensured to be free of local modifications and always represent exactly what is checked in and has been reviewed. So working in our personal environment, that entails also using Git, which people on our team were not always familiar with. So that was first a learning curve that people had to take. And we help a little bit with that by maintaining the Puppet environments automatically on our Puppet masters. So every new system administrator or intern that we get, for example, will have their own environments, and everything is already set up for them. So they can just log into our Puppet masters, anyone actually, and start developing Puppet. Right? So we help. And we help people who are not used to Git. Actually, this was a bit surprising to me because it's such a small detail, but this little shell prompt that we did helped people a lot, especially in the second example. You see what happens after a failed merge, for example. Git will leave you in a state where you basically have to clean up and you're not on any branch anymore. And that happened quite frequently to people inexperienced to Git. And then they came around and asked, like, what's happening? I can't push anymore. I can't pull pull updates anymore. And so this helped people to be aware of the situation. And a recent polls showed that everyone actually on the team found this very, very helpful. So small detail, but helped a lot getting started. Next thing, editor support. We all are used to working on machines. I know there's things like Geppetto and stuff. We use Vim on the console. We work on the Puppet masters directly. So we have enabled all the features that are available out there to enhance our editing experience. And even though people can argue about whether it's good or not, I think it's actually pretty good that we get very early feedback about syntax errors. We don't even have to run the catalog. Sometimes compiling a catalog can take up to 10 minutes in our case. We have to raise the config timeout option quite high for some of our classes, server classes. And so you don't even want to waste that time to test if you can see your syntax is broken right away. Right? So that helped a lot again. Then we also found that style is very important to us. Once we developed, well, our previous speaker said that the code quality varies. And so in our case as well, so if we actually have nested classes, if we have a modular Puppet code, and you jump from one part of the code tree to another part, and you get totally different style. If you're new to Puppet and you don't know which style you should adopt, it can be really frustrating. And also this creates a lot of discussions, the old tabs versus spaces discussion we had early on. Although I'm not religious about it, I have my opinion as well. But this was all ended, finally, when the Puppet Lab style guide came out, and we chose to immediately adopt it, and that has helped us a lot, and our overall code style has actually greatly improved. And also, we have integrated set up the available modules out there to support that in our editor and get early feedback on that as well. So bad style, we try not to talk about issues of style in our code reviews anymore because they're already solved early on by the first feedback loop during our editing. So these are the tools that we use. Puppet Lint, Vim Puppet, very nice. And there's a nice write-up which also shows how to set up a nice editing environment for other editors. But that's basically where we got our ideas from for that. So that already gets us to the next, assuming you have a well-tested change then, you commit that change and push that to Gerrit. So, and from there on, you have a longer feedback cycle, again, where you get feedback from other parts, like from humans, from automated testing. That takes longer. So obviously, what we're trying to do with our workflow is to have as much feedback as possible in a quick way before we get into the next larger cycle, where we only get slower feedback. You see, I'll show you a picture of Gerrit. A lot of people might know it, some might not. As we chose Gerrit because it was well suited for Git, and for one particular reason, because normally Gerrit allows fine-grained control of who can do what on any branch. Branch level access control is what Git really supports, and there was a request from a lot of SiteOps team members that they felt uncomfortable pushing through changes when they can affect so many machines in one go. So they actually wanted it to be mandatory to have a second opinion on any piece of code. And that's what Gerrit allows us to do. We're not actually strictly enforcing that because the change owner himself can also approve his change. So in urgent situations, we can still rush something through, but usually that's not done. Actually, people are using it, as you can see, to comment on changes, present changes. And you also see that these changes are sometimes quite old. They linger around for quite some time if it's not an urgent change or if it has something to discuss. So Agile, in our case, doesn't always mean to get something through as quickly as possible and rush it, but to take the appropriate amount of time to have a balance between quality of a change and the speed at which it is released. So this is our Gerrit dashboard. That's what we do in our free time, basically. So whenever anybody has some time between meetings or something in the morning, we have a tendency to look at our Gerrit dashboard and review stuff. So here's a change in detail. You can see one upvote, one downvote. A downvote actually prohibits a change from being released, so this has to be discussed then. An upvote doesn't automatically allow a change to be pushed out. It requires a +2 actually, which means approved by anyone to actually make it possible to release a change. And you can also see here the automated testing as it kicks in once we push a change. So usually it's a good idea to wait for that as well to finish before you involve more people and add reviewers to your case, to your change. So I'm going to talk about the continuous integration part, the automated testing part. Again, this is also just an example. We used Jenkins because we had it already, could have used Bamboo or whatever, but we used Jenkins. And the Gerrit trigger plugin in particular, there are two plugins. This one is which we use and which is actually actively maintained. Works quite well. You can also see that we have a lot of stuff to do in our repository, a lot of fix-me's still need to be worked on. And here's examples of what kind of tests we do. First of all, of course, for the Gerrit trigger, we do this test. I don't know if you can actually see the color is a bit dark of actually the important part. What we do here is we test the latest commit, which is always the one that's been submitted to Gerrit for review. We test it for syntax and style again, just in case somebody uses a different editor or tries to rush something through and ignores warnings during editing. We actually prohibit this change. We give it a negative review, a negative test result when it doesn't pass these checks. So people are urged to really use the editing feature, editor feature, and everyone does actually. So this rarely fails. The most important part of what we test is that we actually do catalog compilations, as mentioned earlier. This is pretty important to us. We have, in particular, we have one server class which includes almost all the classes we have, which is kind of the eierlegende Wollmilchsau. And this tends to break very often. And the guy whose main task is to work on that role is really, really pissed when we do break his stuff, because it takes 10 to 15 minutes really to compile his catalog. So we do this every time for every change automatically, and that has saved some nerves. And also for some other critical roles. That could be extended as well to do live smoke testing with no ops, for example. We don't do things like that, or virtual machines, but it's just an example. And as I said, it's one of the steps in the workflow that we have, and that everyone should have, in our opinion. The way the exact details vary, right? So one other thing we do is, just as an example, we also do quite a few other tests, not so many role tests yet, of our own created server roles, not so many tests of how external resources interact, for example. That all could be done. On PuppetConf, there was a talk from GitHub which shows pretty nicely what they do with aspect testing, and what we use here is Cucumber, for example. But we also at least do, this is an example of what we do in addition, we also run the smoke tests for each module, maintain exceptions. Quite annoying, but it was as a proof of concept. This is what you could do. As I said, we use Cucumber Puppet, which is discontinued, proof of concept for us, and as a point in our workflow, really, that was enough. We're probably going to switch to Aspect Puppet soon, and then probably also have role testing and stuff like that. That's the future. At the moment, that was our proof of concept, and as a step in the workflow, it's still present and useful for us. So that gets us back to the human part of the second feedback cycle, where we get actually feedback from other people. And you can also see here, again, what I said, that a change is long-lived sometimes, takes a few days, couple of days to pass, gets feedback, gets revised again, so people actually incorporate the feedback that they give. And as automated testing can only do some mechanic testing, you can see here, actually, I don't know if you can read that, but some colleague pointed out that this change actually should be held back until some other task is completed. So, and this can only be spotted by human reviewers. It gives us much more confidence in our changes. So, yeah, highlights. So to reiterate, well, I'll give you some time to read myself as well. Yeah, it really helps. We've seen that first it was implemented as a way to reduce people's fear of breaking stuff, and we've actually seen that the mandatory, almost mandatory review is really, really well accepted in our team, and really has helped us understand what changes are flowing. Apart from looking at the Kanban board, we also see the history of changes. When we are back from vacation, when I come back from vacation, I have a lot of review requests and see a lot of things that were going on for review, and I can kind of catch up by that and follow the discussion again. So it really has helped us in many more ways than we thought initially. And we actually do write better code now due to that as well, because we really talk about not so much the style issues as I've mentioned, but the design issues of how to design Puppet code and make it robust. And also, as a side effect of that, our Git history actually becomes very useful. Previously, we were using CVS to manage the FAI code, and to say, I don't know how to say that again nicely, but it was unusable. CVS itself is not really good at maintaining, at presenting the history of changes to anyone, but it was basically useless. In this case, we can actually use that and see what part, if we have a particular interest in a certain server class, we can see when it was last changed. If something changed that we missed, we can see who was involved in the discussion, restart the discussion again about this change, see the change history, and follow up on the discussion really, and follow up on the change. So the history really actually became useful for us, and we use that a lot as well in some cases, but we use it surprisingly often. So with that, I'll give back to Peter, and he'll summarize everything also later on and talk a bit, but first talk about the final cycle.
yeah, it's also very nice to see who actually else was involved in this chain. If somebody else is like not available at the moment, you can ask at least the one who reviewed the change and ask them what they thought about it. Yeah, so if everything is fine, the rollout starts, and as I mentioned before, things will roll out in production. And we are triggering the Puppet runs on our machines via cron, and the result of that is going to be sent back to Nagios via a passive check result and is presented on our monitoring system. We don't use the Puppet dashboard for reporting, and which was actually a good decision, as I learned today. So we basically have 3 major checks to see how Puppet rolled out the changes. The first check checks if the Puppet was run at least in the last 24 hours, if the catalog applied was successful, and if anything were broken. And another check checks if a machine is in a specific environment, like from one administrator. Because when you are doing when you're putting a machine in your environment, it will disable the automatic Puppet runs, because you don't know what in this environment happens, and only the change owner is responsible for running Puppet runs on that machine which are in their environment. So, but this can lead to a lack of configuration if a machine is in a personal environment for longer than like some days. It won't get security updates or new users, so we like to be monitored of that as well. And we also have a check which checks if the Puppet is disabled locally. We try not to use Puppet agent disable, but in some cases you need to. But so we at least want to know if the check is disabled on a machine, and if Puppet is disabled on a machine, and at least check it. Yeah, and so that's how we get consistency over the whole platform, and that we see that one change is rolled out on every server it needed to be. So to recap things a little bit, and yeah, to recap what we have talked about. From the personal stage, from your local development, you get feedback about the function, if you can test it locally, and with your personal environments, and see if the change actually does what you wanted to achieve. You get feedback about the syntax and the style. With the continuous integration thing, you get feedback from things you probably didn't mention or probably think of, because then you would have tested it before. But so it helps you to get, it reminds you of things you probably didn't know. And from your peers, you get feedback about also style and maybe new ideas, and also that enables like more senior people to mentoring other for like change development, or in terms of how things should be designed. And for the last feedback cycle, you get feedback how this change performed in production via our monitoring system. Yeah, and this does not, and at least the on-call guy gets feedback if this feedback loop doesn't work. So yeah, this is basically all what we had to say and want to show you. We are open for question, and yeah, also we need to mention that we are hiring. And all links from all slides are available under that bit.ly URL, which you can access right now. So, thank you. Questions? No.
Maybe one, the no test you run as a user. So you run it as okay, again, the no-op. Okay, the testing you run as a user of your own Puppet code. You do that on the production machines, you said?
Yes. So
and by using the minus test, you are sure nothing will happen.
Right.
But of course, if you forget the minus test, yeah.
With power comes responsibility, yeah. So Puppet gives you a lot of power, and so...
Are there any things you're still working towards to? Things where you think, are you happy with the complete situation right now? Yeah.
It's probably you want to take over. Do you want to take the mic?
Of course, there are many things, and that's why I also said that's just that's the current state of what we have. It's important for us to have all the elements so we can talk about what we want to improve. As I mentioned earlier, we had a short poll recently where we got feedback from all of our team on what measures and what part of our workflow actually work very well and what needed improvement. For example, automated testing is way too slow. It needs to. They actually get faster peer review before they get feedback on whether something broke or not. At least that was felt strange for some people, and they wanted to improve on that. We want to do cool things, a lot of cool things, but the cool things tend to have to wait sometimes. So, for example, one thing we thought of was to have a automatic environment set up for every change, so that once we push a change in, you can just run with that against. You can have a Puppet run against that change. And you don't need to switch your environment to that change or anything.
So that others can test your change as well, easily.
Exactly. Quickly test, do no runs on server classes they know they need to test it on. And yeah, so these are the examples of kind of things we want to do. Also, we have a little project going on with the command line tool to do, for example, we could have a Puppet run interface which makes sure we don't do something as stupid as that, for example. Also, that interface would interface with our provisioning system, so we could also provision automatically from our tests. All of that are cool ideas which tend to have to wait. There's a lot more in the queue.
Maybe one thing to add, the local development is also which I think we could improve, because currently you need to have access to the whole setup, and you cannot do it on your own when you're traveling. Yeah. So this would be something, yeah. Other questions? No.
No more questions? I think you're ready for lunch. Thank you very much once again. It was very interesting.
Thanks.